So I would quickly start off by thanking Ketan to accept joining us. It's really a pleasure to have you, Ketan. And I've known Ketan for the last 3-4 years, like in terms of like following Metal as a company, and I'm sure like Metal is a name in the industry, in the assessment space. It's kind of this monopoly in India, and he really I used to look up to Metal, and I thought maybe it'll be a great value to understand how Metal started, and as a HR tech leader, how Metal set the benchmark. So Ketan, thank you first of all. Thanks for joining us,
My
and
pleasure. My
really
pleasure,
a,
Kashyap.
a great, yeah. So all of us know the Ketan, who's the founder of Metal. We thought maybe let's go a little backward. Understand like how Ketan was during the college time. So you did your BTech from IIT, and so did the entrepreneurial roots actually start back then? How was it like during your college time?
So I think during the college time, I think just like for everybody else, I think you get the first sense of freedom and independence when you reach college. You kind of meet some awesome people, make some very good friends. You get, I think, very nice, probably the best, tastiest food that you can ever get anywhere from the college messes, and then you don't have any responsibilities. The only responsibility probably is to just probably not flunk. So I think just like everybody else, that was kind of my life as well, and there's nothing more that one can ask. So I think personally for me, I was good in academics, so somehow I could probably crack the exams, but outside that, pretty much clueless in life, just like most of the Gentiles. So only probably interest in the computer side was probably hacking passwords. And so we, back in my years from 97 to 2001, we had Unix servers in IIT Roorkee, and the only interest was just to kind of, through some mechanism, without the intent for misusing it, just can we hack passwords, just for the thrill of it. And I got into some. But I think the turning point was when I got placed in Talisma, which was a startup, kind of one of the first product startups out of India, set up by a guy called Pradeep Singh, who set up Aditi Technologies and then Talisma, and was creating a CRM back in 2001. So, and again, I did not plan for it. It just happened that it was paying decent money and it was open for all branches. I happen to be an industrial engineer, not a computer science engineer. So just it opened for all branches, and luckily it asked some good, easy puzzles to me in the interview. So got through a startup, which was kind of the turning point, and it kind of sowed some seeds of how things happen and how things work in a startup.
Okay. So, I mean, you said you're very studious. I think that is why you went on to do your MBA from IIM Kolkata as well. So after that.
So I was not studious. I was good at academics. So there's a difference.
Right.
So
right. Okay. So how did that MBA transitioning happen? Like, you got a job on campus and you worked for a while, I guess.
Yeah.
And then you went on to do MBA at IIM Kolkata. So
I think,
what?
Yeah.
Most.
So I realized quickly that I probably would be better at business, on the business side of things, as opposed to the tech side of things. And that was a trigger to even try for a MBA, because I was really happy in the job that I was doing. And then you need a little bit of nudge. So people around you, again, preparing for CAT all day long, and then you feel that maybe the time is right, and earlier the better. In hindsight, I probably could have waited for a couple of years, but I think the realization that business side probably the better strength, or bigger strength than tech, was the trigger.
Right. So after you graduated from, like, you've done your MBA, you worked for a while before starting Metal. I think you did a lot of, you worked with a lot of companies. So how was that period? I mean, you worked with, I think, with a bank soon after your MBA, and then
American
you
Express,
transitioned. Right. How was that time? Like, what was like going on then?
So I think so there were 3 companies probably before Metal. First was American Express Bank. So again, very large company, good, decent job, great career, but the realization that probably you are not cut out for it. And again, probably this is a consistent theme if you look at it. If you kind of understand the strengths and weaknesses, and especially things that it's very easy generally that things you don't like, but things, if you can understand things you like, the decision making helps in that sense. And what I did was that within a year I left Amex and joined a garage startup. This is 2005, 6.
Okay.
And this startup was into mobile payments and e-commerce through POS machines at Kirana stores in 2005. Uh, and again, it is in retrospect, it was, yes, it was a risk that suddenly you are from a cushy office, you are like in a very small office. But everything that probably I have done on the B2B side on building ecosystems and enterprise sales, I think the foundations of that happened during my time at IndiePay. So I think there is you would have heard about the steep learning curve in startups. So there is a lot of truth in it, and especially when you not just join it for the sake of joining it, but you put your heart, soul, mind into it, and you kind of work as if your life depends on it. So that is when the real learning starts to happen. And because the cycles are so much quicker in a startup, you make a lot of mistakes, but then you quickly learn, then you do iterate and improve, and suddenly things start shaping up. And that is a real learning, that okay, I tried this, it didn't work, then I tried something else and it started working.
Right.
And so generally I strongly advise young people that at the beginning of the career, if you can work for startups, you can, and really commit to it. It will, in about 2-3 years, you'll be a very different person. And I've seen that happen with people at Metal and outside as well, that it just changes you as a person. It just opens your outlook. And maybe on the negative side, it makes you, turns you somebody who can't go back into a large set of a large organization easily.
Yeah. So how did the story of Metal start? I mean, where did you actually start Metal? What was happening then?
So after IndiePay, I think I left it at a point where it was, even though we raised a lot of money, it was probably going down to a point of no return. Tried to start something back in 2007. We set up a company called Smart Sauda. And this was like, I would say, a Flipkart minus at that point in time. Just gave in too easily at that point in time. How can this work? Why will it work? Kind of questions. But again, struggled for 3-4 months before joining another startup called Isango, and that was into online tours and activities. But again, that clarity that where can I enjoy working, what kind of roles do I enjoy working in, where can I learn the most, was the primary trigger point. And in 2008, there was the first recession. So just like something similar what is happening today, 2008 happened. Tanmay, who was very, very happy in BCG in Belgium, suddenly kind of came back to India after losing his job, and he happened to stay at my place. So, and in that process, in that churn, Metal was born. That he is back to India looking for something new. I was in that mode of starting something, and in that discussion, Metal was born. So in a way, the last recession was when Metal was born. I mean, at least that was the trigger point.
Right.
So I think so. There is always an opportunity. One door closes, another opens up, and probably a similar story would be playing somewhere at a lot of places in India. I hope. What played with us 10 years back.
Sure. I mean, fantastic. So how did you actually choose at assessments, or the domain that you got in? Because did you work in that before, or it was like boom, like one sudden idea and you started it? I'm sure you'd have done a lot of brainstorming, right? So how did you land at the space, the assessment space?
So yes, we did brainstorming in terms of what are our strengths, and we felt that we had grown up with assessments, especially from a consumer standpoint. बचपन से टेस्ट देते चले आ रहे हैं. So we, at least from a consumer standpoint, understand it very well. It was an area that probably was not. It was craving for innovation. A lot of innovation has been done in the last 10 years, but probably a lot of things are still waiting to happen. And did some dipstick, spoke to a few friends who were working in large corporates, spoke to some ex-colleagues, and felt that there was a genuine requirement in the market. Another point was that Meritrack also had got acquired in 2008 by the Manipal Group. And surprisingly, three companies were set up from 2008 to 2010, which was Aspiring Minds, CoCubes, and Metal, on assessments in Gurgaon in that period, right after that. So, so I think so based on our internal strengths, based on some basic market dipstick, and also we were pretty naive. I mean, there was, in hindsight, if you ask me, will you start Metal again? If I know more data, probably I would not start because of certain other things for the market condition, but because we were naive and we wanted to do, and we were almost turning 30. So it was more like now or never, ki abhi nahi to kabhi nahi wala hisab tha.
Right, yeah. So I mean, you were before starting Metal full time, like all of the founders, were they full time, or you were just trying or experimenting, and then you said maybe we'll jump in full time?
So actually, so it was started by my wife and Tanmay. There was a company precursor. The parent company is called IndusLink, which was started by my wife and Tanmay, and so that was into trainings. They were full time into it. At some stage, I got in full time, and Vandita, my wife, got a job to run the house as well. So at any point in time, we were fully committed, but yes, full time into it from the beginning.
Right. So I mean, starting a product in the B2B space, what was your first MVP like, and how did you really validate it? Like, how did you come up with the first thing and then say, yeah, this is probably what we'll build and we'll scale it up? So how long did you take, to get there?
So both Tanmay and me couldn't code at all. So it was, I mean, out of necessity that we wanted a tech co-founder. We tried hard to get somebody on board, came very close 2-3 times, to the extent that, somebody commits, works with us for 3 months, and he has fully joined in a week, and they back out. Twice this happened with us. And then we said, okay, this is not going to work. So we kind of hired 3 people initially. And we had a little pool of money, and we thought that it can last, let's say, even if at a small burn, it can last for 6 to 8 months. So we kind of just dived into it and created that MVP over 3-4 months. And I think that gave us the first set of customers. Obviously, the first set of customers was very light usage. Everything or most of the things done offline through manually by us at the office, and then just setting it up so that if you click a button, this will happen, that kind of thing. And I did share that image, that the first check that we got of, I think, 1,260 rupees, that kind of basic offering.
Right.
But I think what we did was we took the feedback that we got very diligently and rapidly iterated the product. And soon we had the likes of Comviva, EXL, Ericsson also using the product. And yes, it was there were stressful days because कोई भी नया client आता था तो एक बार तो फटता ही था system. So I think we had Capgemini as well. I think I saw Srini as well join. He was our first buyer at Capgemini. Srini, are you there? So he kind of I saw him. So he again, any new client coming in, we kind of it's like a new doctor.
So we're playing some of the pictures, Ketan. I think your first tech picture that you shared. It's kind of epic. So
this is 1,260 most valuable kind of money. So it is signed by Asim Sadana, who was the CEO of Isango back then, and it's November 2010. So again, quickly iterating, taking that feedback, going back again in the market. Initial clients kind of taking that risk with us, and they also suffering initially, but the product kept on improving month on month. And because the product was improving so much so quickly, and there was no equivalent competing product who could catch up. Even if there was no way they could have caught up with us. And that was our belief that given that we are working with such intensity, there's just no way people can create a similar product not working full time or working on the sites.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's how startups keep building that. They keep
Yeah.
scratching and building the product until they start hitting large
Right.
companies.
So this is a picture of the first assessment that is on the screen. I think was it at Comviva, the first
Yeah,
assessment that you? Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
How was that? Like, were you personally there monitoring it, or you
So
were
I was
there at the
personally
site?
there. I was
Okay.
personally there, and I think we were pestering Comviva for a couple of months, probably
Mm-hmm.
August 2010 to September, October 2010. And suddenly one fine day, I get a call in the evening, 7 p.m. that we have a drive in a campus tomorrow. Can you do the assessments? And
Right. Yeah.
we said yes. I mean, obviously you say yes
Yeah.
for an incoming call like that. And I think that was the
Yeah.
turning point that gave us the confidence, Yarki. uh, so whenever somebody is in a last minute situation, at least वहाँ तुम्हारा product बिल्कुल चल सकता है
Mm-hmm.
कि somebody
Yeah.
has to go to a campus and everything else has failed, or they don't want to do manual testing, or they don't maybe HR doesn't want to carry tons of paper with them. So our
Yeah.
product can kind of fit in at that point in time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
initially, as I said, we first built the basic platform, then loaded, created our own content
Mm-hmm.
uh, initially, and then we started making our standardized assessments, and we made our simulators, and we made a full suite of services of conducting the assessment. So for a very proactive HR, very involved HR person, we had a full suite of, you can customize to whatever degree you want while maintaining standardization. And to a lazy HR, it was just a click away. You just click and things are ready to go. So that
Yeah.
suite of services kind of were built over the next 2, 3, 4 years, and it was just very, very heartening to hear very positive feedbacks from clients that yes, this is solving my problem, and some of the
Right.
feedback that we've ever used so far, it just has changed their lives.
Yeah. I'm sure. I mean, you said that during the same time there was CoCube and there was Aspiring Minds. So and all of them are based out of Gurgaon, the same place. And so how was it like working with competition at the same time and bootstrap? You got funded by then, and so how did that like feel?
So in 2010, Aspiring Minds was a much bigger company, and CoCubes was doing something else. So CoCubes was not
Mm-hmm.
competition back then. So
Yeah.
I mean, and Aspiring Minds was also focused on building AMCAT, which was a B2C offering for college kids. So again, not direct competitor. We were building a platform for B2B companies. So there was no direct competition. Eventually, everybody converged into one area, but initially there was no direct competition, and we were doing our own thing, and they were doing their own thing. And the market was sufficiently large that
Mm-hmm.
everybody could probably do independent things.
Right. Okay. So how long did it take for you to raise your first funds, and were you able to like successfully run the company bootstrap with the revenues that you were getting?
Obviously, 1,260 rupees wouldn't have cut it
Right.
for a long time.
Yeah.
So I think what we did was we took advice of one of our investors and pinged some 30 people that we had either worked or interacted with in the past. And we wanted to raise a small round of 40 lakhs, and 6 of them agreed to put in 5 lakhs or 10 lakhs. And we just raised our first round in about 15 days.
Okay.
It was
Nice.
more friends and family round. So think of this as, again, 2010, while there were a few startups around, but it was not as prevalent as today.
Yeah.
So I think back then there was a standard term sheet made by Sasha, which in probably 2003, 4, 5, and that term sheet I hear still going the rounds. So that standard term sheet, and closed that first 6 friends and family kind of round into October 2010. And once that was done, again, luckily Bloom got set up at the same point in time. So we were Bloom's second investment. So Karthik and Sanjay probably came to our office, and I guess they would have loved the office. It was such a small office that not more than 5 people could probably fit in.
Yeah.
So Bloom happened. Bloom got closed in March of 2011, and that was the first institutional round. We also got in a domain expert, a psychometric expert in Dr. Paranjay Singh, and he helped us a lot to carve out a psychometric offering. So that was again a quick round, quick closure, and as you say, so Bloom was around, was just set up, and we heard about them, and we closed the round with them.
Yeah.
So it's a pleasant experience working with them all through, but it was again very, very quick with those guys as well. They made a quick decision and said, yes, we are in.
Okay. So I mean, you got that psychometric expert and all that on board, and so how was that? Because I think you needed a lot of expertise in assessments, especially, and getting the initial set of key people on board. So did the investor actually help it, or like were you personally involved in getting the people that you needed in the company?
I think the investors were definitely guiding us, but obviously to get the key people was mostly our job. And given that some early wins gave us a lot of confidence, given that we had managed to close 2 rounds of funding very quickly, it just became increasingly easier to recruit people along the way. So it was mighty hard in the first year. It became relatively easy in the second year, and then increasingly it became easier. And what we initially tried was to get people at lower salaries than their market salaries. That didn't work out. So, I mean, we kind of interplayed between cash and ESOP components, and that worked out very well for us. So, generally the environment that we kept at Metal was very open. It was, a lot of it was from my previous experiences at Thalesma and IndiePay and Isango. So that helped a lot as well. There was like, we used to have the concept of happy moments in the office. Even if everything is not going well, if clients are kind of shouting at us, we kind of made it a point to have those set of happy moments for the employees. And be it cricket in the office, be it maybe small parties in the office.
Right. I mean, there's one picture of that, I think, cricket in office. That was epic, like to play that cricket at office. Yeah. So, for a lot of us, like, in the early stage as B2B startups, we get those first set of clients, but going from the next phase. You got the first client, Isango, which you worked with, and then getting those next set of clients. So how hard was it? Typical B2B SaaS product in Indian context.
So it's like lega kaun or lene ke baad paise. So again, you 3 types of sale: why your product, why this concept, why your product, and why now. So Isango was easy because Asim was a startup by himself, and he kind of helped us. Okay, we'll try it out. We'll help you and support you. And again, that's important, not to burn your bridges. For probably younger guys who are seeing that, our first client was my last company. Again, the second client was through a referral of my fellow alumni from Roorkee, and she kind of referred me to her HR. It was a company called Nabler in Bangalore, and we closed it over the phone.
Okay.
But to run a sales motion, and again, sales per se was new to me, and as product was new to Tanmay. So doing that, I remember probably early first half strolls of having a list of 25 companies on a piece of paper, and just calling each of those 25 guys one after the other every third day. So that was the process. Just keep pushing them, and maybe one of them will. So Comviva cracked like that. That okay, tomorrow we are going. You have been pushing me for 2 months. Are you up? Are you game for it? Probably things are much more structured now, I would imagine, and maybe you already, before even you start building something, you already speak to 5-6 guys and then start building the product. But for us, it was we are all in, and bana liya hai ya kuch bana rahe hain, to isko to bechna to hai
hi. I'm sure. So so sales, you said sales was new to you, like it was product was new to Tanmay. So you were heading the sales, or like what were your key areas at Metal?
So yeah, for the first, I think 6-7 years I was heading sales. 7 years probably I was heading sales until we got a head of sales in Siddharth. But so they're just 2 functions. Either आप बना रहे हो कोई product या बेच रहे हो कोई product. Again, बनाने में you can probably have product and tech under it, but so those are just two functions in a company. And I think the founders, if there are two founders, each one has to take each of those two functions and make that happen. And yes, it is mighty hard, but if the product is good, if there is enough conviction, and if the market supports you, then there is enough and more opportunity to build a big business.
Yeah. Right. So, I mean, I think the most interesting thing that most of us want to know is a Mercer deal. You know, it took about 7 to 8 years, and you know, we read on papers, we read on your story that metal. And personally, I remember, you know, the day that news came, I was like really amazed to see the valuation and the speculation on the valuation. It was not. So, how did that happen? I mean, the journey of running metal, you know, from a VC funded company, and then you know deciding on the path of exit. You know, that would have been a very key step. I mean, in your career. How did that really happen?
I think, yeah. So maybe acquisition is a big milestone, but I feel probably the bigger milestone for us along the way was becoming profitable. So in 2016, we became profitable, and think of it as a scenario when, let's say, that we have Snapdeal next to our office and we have Zomato next to our office, and there are periods when they're raising tons and tons of money, and our tech guys come to us and say, my salary is getting doubled. Why don't you just match it, or I'm out of the office in the next building. So in that scenario, getting to that state of becoming profitable and just controlling our own destiny instead of the next investor controlling the destiny of the company. So that, I think, changed as our stance in a lot of ways. We kind of, instead of from a survival mode, we kind of started looking at things differently, and essentially we had a destiny in our own hands. So that was a defining moment. And once that happened, and once we started achieving a scale of north of $10 million of revenue, that kind of led to a spurt of inbound interest. And Mercer was one such inbound interest. It just helped that the Mercer head CEO was also from IIM Calcutta, a senior from IIM Calcutta as well. But I think the trigger was that, okay, here is a large, so 10 million probably is a cusp, I would imagine, in B2B globally, where you start becoming meaningful, or in 5 to 10 million range. So where we kind of were fairly big in India, and we were getting business from all over the world, from 80 countries actually. And and there was some other, in a short period of time, inbound interest from a lot of other places as well. And I think at that point in time, the board decided, let's appoint a banker. We did a market scan, and of all the options, and the option were not doing anything about it. Just keep growing the way you're growing profitably, taking VC money, which is like diluting 20% more, and take more money and grow to the next stage. Or there were PE offers around, let's say, dilute 70-80% and grow it for the next 6-7 years, or wait for a few years, go for an IPO, or tie up with a strategic player like Mercer. So of all the options, we felt that given that Mercer was the biggest HR consulting company in the world, given that there was a meeting of minds with both the India CEO and the regional head for products in Singapore, and given that they were acquiring us or interested in us for the right reasons. And it's like a marriage. It is like they were great at consulting but did not have technology. We were great at technology and did not have any clue of consulting. So it was a good complementary marriage of sorts. So I think those were the key triggers for us to take that call. It started, I think the first meeting would have happened in January 2017. The deal happened eventually in October 2018.
Wow.
So it took, and this is when both parties were agreeable at all points in time.
Wow.
So maybe not agreeable at all points in time. We got the term sheet. We agreed. We said yes in February. So from February to October is the actual deal. But before that, it was more dating. It was just meeting people. It was just evaluating us from all angles.
Right.
And so that was how it happened. Again, I think the biggest factor here is that we got lucky as well. So if you look at CoCubes, it got acquired by Aon Hewitt in 2000, I would imagine 17. Aspiring Minds just got bought in 2019 by SHL. So I think this sector played out well for all three of us, and yes, so we were at the right place at the right time, and a big factor is because we were in the area where large global organizations were interested to be in India and take this product out of India to the world.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, during this, the decision of selling it off, how were the co-founder sentiment like? Were all of you in the same boat, or was it like a hard thing to take the call?
So, so obviously there were a lot of discussions around it. There were all sorts of angles and all sorts of. Some people were for it, some people were against it, and but ultimately you take a decision, and again you agree and commit, or you disagree and commit. Whatever you do, you kind of just take a decision, and then make sure that you stick by the decision until things substantially change or materially change, and then you execute it. There are a lot of factors, and probably one of these days put something out as well that what are the kind of negotiation points. Well, it's a long, tedious process in terms of what should be the valuation, what should be the structure of the deal. Should you get money up front or later? What period of time, cash versus stock? Making sure that employees are well taken care of, their ESOPs are properly kind of paid for in a very fair manner. What are the indemnities? Who bears the insurance costs? I would say the escrow agreements, employee agreements, post acquisition, disclosure letters. So there's a ton of stuff which kind of go through, and each of them are like points wherein, at least for US companies buying Indian companies, they become very, very important because they don't want any past liabilities, and experience has been mixed buying Indian companies in the past. And some of the laws also in India are also very ambiguous. So maybe Bombay High Court has given a decision in one direction, and Delhi High Court would have given a decision for the same case in some other direction. So you don't know what is the right thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so it's a long, tedious process, lots of learnings, but I wish it could have been shorter.
Yeah. So I mean, the valuation that most of the media reported was roughly around 300 crores, and so how did that like feel? First time when you're making around 10 million revenues by the time you said yearly, and it was probably valued at 5x more in terms of the valuation. So how did that number of valuation come?
So I think probably I won't go in the exact number, but I'll just give you some pointers around. So we had a big corporate business, but we had a fairly large government business as well, or quasi-government business. So we while we are a large corporate player, we are India's largest skill assessment company also, which means we work with the skills ministry to conduct thousands of blue collar assessments also all across the country. So that is a business which like moves in fits and starts. It's not a annuity business like a corporate business. So typically, so there are again multiple factors on what goes in valuation. What is the revenue of the company? What is the growth rate? What is the market size? Competitive scenario? Any USP that you might have that others might have. So again, a lot goes there. But a good reference point is anywhere from probably 4x to 8x for Indian companies. It can be more if you are in a very niche area and you're growing faster. If you're growing 200%, it should definitely be more. But if you're growing in the range of, let's say, close to 50 to 100% or 50 to 75%, that's a good number. Government business multipliers are very, very different. It can be anywhere from 2x to 4x of revenue. And again, we had very different offers from Indian companies as opposed to outside, maybe US companies. And Indian companies typically were more comfortable valuing us as a function of profit and as opposed to revenues, which is okay. I mean, which is how probably I would also value if I'm going to acquire somebody.
Right.
But because
so that brings us to the next question. Are you an investor now? Because you would have made tons of money, right? So we wanted to learn how much money you made.
So
Is
not
it
tons of
possible you
money,
could?
but
Yeah.
enough money to probably just take it easy for a couple of years.
Oh, come on.
So
Yeah.
so I
Yeah.
think uh, so yes, I'm an investor now, and I
Good to
have
know.
invested
Yeah.
in a couple of companies. And
Mhm.
again, I wrote a recent blog post also that what are the things that I look for, and mostly it is market against each other. I mean, if you have a stellar team in a great market, then and a half decent product, that's kind of a winning combination. And
Right.
there's something, so for example, one company that I'm investing in is around blue collar workers, providing jobs to blue collar workers outside India, especially in these times. It's more like a social work as well. And
Right.
another company is around tech, release for release orchestration. So yeah, so it's our time to give back as well to the next set of founders who will be setting up their companies now. So
Yeah.
yes, active on that side, and probably thinking about.
Okay. Is that what 1 to 10 is all about? Like in the discovery mode?
Yes. So yeah. So again, doing a few experiments in areas that again we are comfortable with, some strength areas that we have. At least me and my wife have, and trying to kind of once a few experiments work, we'll probably launch something formally.
Okay. So, I mean, how do you see the HR tech space as such as an investor? Do you see that there is a scope for another metal to come in the market with some differentiation? Is the market big enough to accommodate more HR tech startups in similar space?
So 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 metal, I would say, was a subset in HR tech. The HR has multiple things, probably 6 different things, right from recruitment to performance management to
Yeah.
a lot of other things. But metal was just around assessments. So is there market for a new? So I think one comment that I mentioned that I'd probably hesitate on the assessment side today is because of the small market size in India, or relatively small market size in India. So market in India for assessment would be around, let's say, 500-600 crores, or maybe close, let's say $100 million. That's the total market size. And if you add up the revenues of the top 3 companies or top 5 companies, you would come to probably 400-500 crores. And then there's a very, very long tail around it. So I would say that, and I'm excluding the government assessments, which is a very, very large market, and this assessments around IIT, JEE, and I mean, so that market is a very different market, and this just within assessments. So
Yeah.
if somebody's starting only for corporate assessments, unless they focus globally, Indian market is slightly constrained, and there are large players already taking large chunks of that market. But in HR tech right now, I would imagine that everything is working remotely. So if you're working remotely, there is an entire new avenue or kind of field of play for HR guys, because everything is new. How do you ensure employee morale? How do you ensure compliance? How do you ensure productivity in a remote setting? Is all it's like everything is new now.
Yeah.
So you have been maybe playing cricket on the field, and suddenly you have to play cricket at home. How do you play it? Again, there are new set
Right.
of rules.
Yeah.
So that area of remote working is absolutely a new world, and a lot of HR innovations might come in that area. Then I would say that because of remote, another trend will come by, and that is my guess, is that you can be anywhere. I mean, let's say if I'm hiring somebody and I'm sitting in Bangalore, and the right talent is in Singapore, I probably will go ahead and hire him, because anyways the person is working remotely most of the time. And if there's a US company hiring some Indian guy, so the whole set of managing the payroll, managing the compliances for remote workforce. Let's say you have people in 20 countries. It is today a nightmare to manage, let's say, this compliances and payrolls for those guys. So they have startups. As we speak, I've heard about 5-6 startups just in this area of managing a global workforce. And then I feel there is, we we saw what was the condition of the migrant population. Just managing the blue collar workforce jobs,
Right.
and how to give them respectable jobs, maybe setting up a great marketplace for them, maybe tools for selection, tools for let's say shortlisting. I would imagine that today it's totally broken, and there would be some company that will try to fix it and will fix it. And it can be a deep solution. So, for example, Urban Clap or Urban Company probably has a deep solution for beauticians today, and maybe massage workers today. So maybe you can probably have a deep solution for one particular area or one particular type, which is the overseas job. So, given that the world is totally changing around us, I think HR tech would have a field day in the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay. So I think we'll start taking questions now. I think there are a few people who asked some questions. So I'll just take the first question. It's from Tanuj here. So he asked, like, what is the future of assessments, and do you see industry 4.0 fit into the HR tech?
So what is the future of assessments? I would imagine it will totally go remote. So again, I would break it down into two parts. One is measuring your skills more deeply, and the second is ensuring that no unfair means were used to kind of while the measurement happened. So a big part of our business was around proctoring as well. So proctoring means prevention of cheating when you're taking a test remotely. So the first part is measuring the skills deeply, be it cognitive skills, behavioral skills, technical skills. How do you keep innovating? And given that you're getting so much data, how do you keep standardizing for more and more deeply around measuring the skills? And the second is making sure that you are not able, I mean, it's a fair playground for everybody. You're not able to employ any unfair means. And the system kind of detects everything around it. On the second part, I don't know what is 4.0, probably the fourth generation of something, but so probably if you can be more specific around the second part.
I think he refers to blockchain. He just says like blockchain and probably all the emerging technologies out there.
So what I know of blockchain, I'm no expert here, is that it's a decentralized system or decentralized computer. So unless you can't do something in a centralized way, should you go in a decentralized way? So as long as centralized system of assessments is working, I think it'll keep working. And probably if there is a corner case where it can't work, then probably a blockchain solution might come out and work here. But at least I can't think of something in a very decentralized manner. Maybe a certification or a badge of people's skills just out there in a decentralized manner, which is proof of what you have done, can be something. But which is too vague right now in my mind.
Right. So we have, I think, Jignesh as well. So he's into assessments that is driven by VR and AR. So I think there are companies that do assessments based on game. You know how? I think Jignesh, hi. If you can probably.
Hi Kashyap. In fact, I know Ketan. Ketan and I met some time ago. Hi Ketan, how are you?
I'm good, Jignesh. Thank you.
Great insights, Ketan. In fact, after a little while into the journey into the assessments, in fact, I concur with a lot of your points there. In fact, we moved away from VR AR. It's too niche to scale up at this point, even more tough with contact and sanity and hygiene. So we came into mobile assessments these days. How can we use these games and integrate the interviews, video interviews, and everything as a single suite solution? That's where we are. So great insights. Maybe some ideas that I can pick up today from the section.
We met, right? Jignesh, you came to our office and did a demo, right?
We came to your office. I gave you a demo of the VR solution that I had, both to you and Tanmay.
Yeah, I remember. So, I mean, he had an awesome game. So, the best VR game that probably I would have played was created by Jignesh. And I mean, it was, and I think you were working with Dr. Singh as well, who was one of our investors, Dr. Puranjay Singh as well.
Correct.
So, so I think my only comment there is that given that the market is small, so had we been in the US, probably Metal would have been a 10x bigger company. Let's say just transforming everything, just because of the smaller size of the market. It is just too thin a sliver. The sales effort to sell something as innovative as what you created at that point in time is just too much, and there's just not enough takers, even if the product might be very good.
I very much agree with you, Ketan, on that. But I have a small question here. Starting in India, especially you being one of the pioneers in the space in India, how did you take it to the countries outside? Is it more of a pull or is it a push? What happened exactly there?
Okay, so I think so there was a period where we nearly died. 2013, 14, 15 was a period where we nearly died because we went a little prematurely to the US. And we went to the US because we managed to sell a $500,000 deal sitting from Gurgaon. And suddenly when you're selling 1 lakh, 2 lakh, 5 lakh kind of accounts, and suddenly you find that, okay, you manage to sell $500,000 of accounts from India. You suddenly feel that there's an entirely different world outside India. So you should explore that. But what happened there was that एक deal तो आ गई, but उसके बाद second deal, third deal, fourth deal आने में, it was like you spent 2-3 years, and while we were discussing with Cisco at one point in time, Microsoft and Amazon at the same point in time, they wanted to pull us in 3 different directions. So there was an India business, which was status quo, and these 3 giants wanting to develop something very, very customized to their own liking in 3 different directions. So it was just very, very difficult for us to manage that kind. And unless you have a product that has a strong pull on its own outside India. And again, remember that we generally were very conservative, and we are conservative by nature. So while it might work for a lot of other companies, but at least for a company like Metal in the area that we were in, at least what we have learned is let there be a lot of pull factors all around, and then we had we set up an inside sales team and said, okay, जिस country से ज़्यादा धंधा आने लगेगा, we'll want to set up an office there or not. So let it be US. If it is US, let it be Mexico. So for example, outside India, the biggest country for us was Mexico, of all places. And we then had an excellent partner in Mexico, which was selling our products in that geography. So I think it should be pull led as opposed to push led outside India, if your primary market is India.
Awesome. Thank you, Ketan. In fact, I would love to get in touch with you sometime later. So we can pick your brain on the whole journey.
Absolutely, would love to.
Thank you very much.
Welcome. Kashyap, you're on mute.
Sorry, I think. Yeah, so we have a question from Dr. Kalyan. He asks, like, how do you see skill development and capacity building or training going to be during this crisis? So that's his question.
I think, so if you ask me, so they will, so I was hearing Hitesh's session last month, and he said that Hitesh is the CEO of Naukri, and he said that hiring has come to an absolute standstill in India. Now, if hiring has come to a standstill and we are in, let's say, April, May, where like the new batch is graduating, and there will be a lot of people whose entry-level jobs would be postponed or cancelled. So I think one has to manage their career on their own. So in this time, I would say that maybe enhance the skills. So it is up to each individual how they want to, in what direction do they want to enhance their skills. Nobody will give things on the platter. I think what the world that we are probably heading to is कि अगर आपको कुछ आता है तो there will be a lot of backers, there will be a lot of people chasing you. But अगर आपको कुछ नहीं आता है ना तो फिर आप, I mean, you will have to really kind of put fight and be extremely lucky. Otherwise, you will struggle a lot. So use this time to enhance the skills. What I've learned is that Indians input तो बहुत लेते हैं, मतलब खूब सारी reading करेंगे, खूब सारा ज्ञान ले लेंगे, but output कुछ नहीं देते हैं. So maybe you should write a few things, maybe maintain a blog, at least at the very least, maybe maintain a Twitter channel. Because when you write, you start thinking, and that is when your thoughts and your ideas get chiseled, refined. And I see this changing happening, but it is still a trickle. So we have been trained to just take in things, अंदर ही बस घोटा लगाते रहो, but बाहर कुछ मत निकालो. So I think one one probably aspect of training and improving yourself is to give that output to input ratio should be very high. It is definitely less than 1. It is probably 0.1 or something for Indians in general. So that
Okay.
if one can increase that, it probably can, because then you don't have, when you go for an interview, you just say that, okay, here is my work in this area. Here's my, let's say, list of blogs. Here are my set of, let's say, panel discussions. Here's my set of discussion, and I'm an industry expert here already. It just takes a very, very different turn when you probably start from that standpoint.
Interesting. That's a very, quite true. So we have a question from Srinivas Kolluri, who asked, like, why did you want Metal to be a B2B company? Because your competitors' aspiring minds were in B2C space, and so did you ever think of changing your business plan? Is what he asked.
Again, so we again, the DNA of both Tanmay and me was B2B. So I at IndiePay had set up B2 or had done B2B sales. It just came naturally. So that was number one. We seriously explored going B2C, but at every point in time, that market share, the market size was a question that we couldn't answer. I mean, every time we kind of did that analysis कि यार अगर let's say हमने 100% market भी capture कर लिया, सारे students भी अगर हमसे test लेने लगे graduate होने, तब भी market बहुत छोटा लगा हमें. And that same effort to, every time we came to the conclusion कि जितनी मेहनत अगर हम उसमें कर रहे हैं, अगर हम सिर्फ B2B में करते रहेंगे, तो we'll probably become much bigger as a company. We will be more respected because we'll be number one in this area, and that eventually what happened. So we felt that market size was a limiting factor there. Plus, maybe our DNA was more B2B, and we were more comfortable in that skin. So those were probably the two reasons that we did not venture into that. But I think in hindsight, less is more. Kam cheeze karo, अच्छे से karo is that mantra.
Right, the focus, as they call it. So Yashwant actually has a very interesting question. So he is asking, like, why do most founders, they after they exit, they move to Singapore? Like, do you get some tax benefits, or so what's the reason?
So you can get tax benefits if your company is registered in Singapore. So we were an Indian company, and we paid all our taxes. Me personally, I think I have 2 young kids, and we wanted to, just take a break. We had been in Gurgaon for 15, 16 years. We just wanted to take a break. So it's more like a break vacation for us. And in that vacation, we were in a lockdown.
Okay.
But again, it was more a personal family break that we wanted to take. And that is why Singapore was a sweet spot, because it is close to India. And we can just like in domestic flight, you can just go back anytime you want. And still, so there's not much change. It is very much like Gurgaon as well. So not much change, but still, it's like as dense as Gurgaon. So except probably pollution, everything, most of the things are similar, I think, here.
Nice. So your kids actually, I think did they join school yet, or how is the scenario currently?
So schools, the local schools are just opening out here. So yeah, one kid will start school next week.
Okay, that's cool. So I think Yash has another question, slightly, on a different area. Like, how did you get into the psychometry area? Was it like, how did that happen? You went into psychometry, right?
So I think initially when you were trying to raise money, I think a few investors asked, "यार आपका ना HR से कोई लेना देना है, ना psychometry से कोई लेना देना है, आगे कर क्या रहे हो?" So
right, yeah.
So I think psychometric we had to enter because of the market demand. People said, yes, we want technical assessments, but we also want cognitive assessments, and we also want psychometric assessments. And given that we took that call early on to bring in Dr. Singh, we kind of had a roadmap already in place. And then we invested early and hired the right set of people to build the product around that. And yes, initially it was, it took its time, and psychometric assessments, you can't just do it quickly. You just have to
Yeah.
keep improving until you reach that threshold where the product starts working on the ground.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
so it was more market pull than anything else.
Okay. So you also like Metal website has this, certified by American Institute of Psychology, and so all these partnerships and alliances. How did that happen? Like,
They came much later, I think. So this alliance
okay.
probably would have happened in 2016 or 2016, 17.
Oh, okay.
We had more money
Uh-huh.
when you're profitable, so we could probably do all these things.
Okay. Right. So it was like costing you, is it? Getting the certification.
Well, I'm sure. I mean, so
Okay.
probably America is a capitalist market. So कुछ ठप्पा भी
Right.
लगाएंगे तो पैसे तो लेंगे.
Right. Yeah. So we have a question, from Tanuj again. He's asking, you mentioned that government assessment setup is totally different from B2B, other private space. So what stopped you from tapping into that huge chunk of market? I'm sure like you're already a market leader in government assessment, right?
So so the big elephant in that room is TCS. So
Okay.
TCS
Right.
competes with. So there were a lot of players. So there's TCS, there's NIIT, there is NSCIT. I mean, NSC, National Stock Exchange, has a IT company which is called NSCIT, and they run assessments.
Right.
So
Okay.
so there are these players who kind of are built for this. So TCS
Mhm.
has tons and tons of experience around government tenders, and
Yeah.
how to kind of meander their way and win a government tender is their specialty. So it's just very difficult to compete with that skill set, and
Mhm.
and that is why. So if you have to do, for example, railways would conduct 1 crore assessments a year, and at, let's say, I don't know, 300 rupees, so maybe $5, that's a very, very large account. So 50-60 million dollar account. So each such account is a very, very large account, but you can probably start getting chunks from there, but to compete head on is difficult. So we had a few clients around that, and increasingly we were getting PSUs to run our assessments. Maybe had we stuck on over the next 4-5 years, we would have built that side of the business. We definitely had a better product than them, than all these companies. It was just that the dynamics of the sales process was too alien for us, and we probably would have learned along the way, but probably we just couldn't come to that step at that point, till that point in
Right.
time, till 2019.
Mhm. Okay. Um, yeah. So we have a question from Vikas. So Vikas is asking, like, what are the other areas? I mean, you mentioned that there are 5 to 6 areas in HR tech. So what are the areas that you want to improve in HR tech? Any favorite areas that you have?
So think of, there's a lot of as basic as an HR platform. So the Darwin Box, which has done some good stuff over the last 3-4 years. So there is a lot of so maybe a lot of machine learning in HR processes that is absolutely totally missing today. At least I haven't seen any company around some of those areas. Maybe giving employees. So one area which I found very fascinating is so just like tech people use a lot of tools for themselves, they probably at any point in time, you would any scan that you do, you will see that you're using 40 different tech tools, and different people in different tech niches are using their own set of tools. The rest of the organization doesn't do that. So every time you have to do sales forecasting, there'll be new Excel that you start with. You'll not, there's no checking, just like VSS is used for checking, or GitHub is used for checking in your work. There's no equivalent check-in environment for the rest of the organization. So how do you make the rest of the organization more efficient, or how do you make HR more efficient in some of their works? And again, giving applications around very little coding, on zero coding. If I have a platform where I can create my own set of app to do my repetitive work without the need to code, probably that is a very interesting area. And sales guys can, tech guys can do it because they probably can code, but how about the rest of the stuff? So marketing, HR, just for people. And I mentioned, as I said, this entire remote work, everybody that I'm speaking to is saying that I'm working probably much more than what I was working in the office.
Right. Yeah.
While
Yeah.
things have become more efficient, but I have started working much more.
Right. Yeah.
So the first notion is, यार ये तो उल्टा हो रहा है, मतलब everybody thought कि कोई काम नहीं कर पाएगा.
हाँ, बिल्कुल.
But
I mean, the funny thing is, I today I was just seeing another a webinar on how to handle, work from home, because a lot of people are getting panicked, and there's a lot of the side effects of working too much. So I think a lot of people are feeling a little unproductive at home. While a lot of them say there is high productivity, but some of them complain of the work environment and productivity. So there's a lot of people talking about it. How do you make the work from home more productive and all that stuff?
And this is just probably this is all new, but think of people with young kids and both the family working, both members of both parents working.
Yeah.
How do you manage that situation? I mean, just
it's very difficult. Yeah,
it's very difficult unless you have a very solid support system, which all of us might not have at any point in time. So there are just applying the remote filter on top of work, just applying some AI ML filter on top of that. And maybe a no code filter on top of that, you have probably you can get 20 opportunities. And I mean, probably I kind of get a lot of these ideas कि यार ये काम अगर कोई करेगा तो इसमें हो सकता है opportunity निकले. So maybe 20-30 ideas every month around this.
So I mean, so you said like AI ML, startups that use AI ML in HR tech. So we see a lot of companies that do job mapping based on the roles to the companies. I mean, so have you personally liked any of them, like in terms of mapping the roles and in terms of the skill set mapping, and then pairing them to the right company?
At Metal, I think the last 3-4 years, huge surging business was around training of employees, which means that let's say Accenture would have lakhs of employees. So based on their interest levels, based on their proficiency level in a particular skill, based on what an organization needs in 1 year, 3 years, and 5 years, किस बंदे को कौन सी ट्रेनिंग देनी चाहिए? Just the first level of kind of decision making, and the second is how to make that training effective, and is it effective or not, and is it kind of fulfilling the organization's long-term objective or not. So that was that was seeing a huge surge, and probably you can just map it out that for job seekers as well, that if you have a certain skill, what is a good job mapping. But honestly, I haven't come across, in a job setting, I haven't come across a very good tool here, which can probably maybe either suggest on a B2C side, suggest what you should do, or on a B2B side that this guy is best for this type of job.
Right. So it's always challenging.
It's a tough one.
Right. Correct. I mean, while the demand supply is there, you also need to skill. You need to create the right supply. That's where I think the skilling platforms are coming up, more of upskilling and all that. While there is that skill, I think the right mapping comes in. So that's like an inherent challenge. So I mean, a lot of these, I have people who ask me like, I'm new into this field and I want to get into HR tech. So any advice for such people in general, like, because given the scenarios, I think jobs at large, are affected due to COVID. A lot of companies are in freezing mode. I mean, hiring freeze, and some of them very much are laying off. And so the scenario for the next 6 months at least looks a little bleak. And so how is it going to be like HR professionals at large? Because their roles are going to change, isn't it?
Yeah. So again, I see this both. So while this is a challenge, this is also an opportunity. So maybe in 3 years, there would be a few HR personnel who will be experts in, let's say, remote working. How do you manage a remote workforce? Let's say you will have specialists in only that area, and probably that will be a new job title, that just managing the remote workforce in a company, or remote workforce strategy in a company. How should it happen? What should be the do's? What should be the don'ts? So, I mean, it is, I would say, up to each individual how they invest in themselves given that some of these trends are playing out. And so each change, each churn, as I said, we were born out of a crisis, out of the last recession. So each churn kind of brings about some winners, some fresh winners, and maybe people who probably maintain their status quo. So that's my advice. I mean, invest in yourself, take maybe calculated risks on yourself, maybe work on equipping yourself with some extra skills, extra knowledge, and then apply your knowledge. Try to get an avenue to apply your knowledge, and maybe if somebody has one opening, and if you have that edge, you will get that job.
Yeah. So we have, like, I think we'll just take a few more questions and probably like leave it open to people. So in B2B sales, I think Harsha is asking this question. In B2B sales, what was your biggest challenge? Is it the customer doesn't understand the need sometimes, or is it takes a lot of time for them to make the decision? What is the real challenge there?
I think the biggest challenge is clearly why now. Why now का मतलब है, तो let's say they say यार कि मुझे assessment कराना है, and then they say यार मुझे तो metal से ही कराना है, but मुझे आज ही कराना है was the biggest challenge. There were so many. I mean, we set up an office in Bombay early on, and we had to shut it down. और वहाँ से feedback आता था यार मैं चक्कर ही काटता रहता हूँ, कोई सब कहते हैं हम कराएंगे, धंधा देंगे, but कोई धंधा देता नहीं.
Right. Correct. Right.
Yeah. So I think the biggest challenge definitely is why now. What compelling event or what compelling scenario you paint for that person to buy a product today. मतलब उसी मीटिंग में कहे यार ये लो चेक और मुझे ही दे दो आज, किसी तरीके मुझे आज ही देके जाओ तुम. So so that is typically the toughest challenge. This is the toughest challenge, not just for HR tech or assessment, but in general also. That you can convince them about that area, about your product, but timing of it, so clearly that was the biggest thing for us.
So I mean, in terms of that, like this, I think gives another thought that a lot of companies in India, especially, they give freebies. At least they give the discounting, deep discounting, or initially they say it's free, and then So did you also try some strategies like that, or were you very hard on selling it for a value that you have in mind?
I think our learning there has that we initially do a lot of free trials, but then we said no free trials also. We said we will only we'll only do paid trials. So there was a standard, I think, 15-day free product review that you can just go online and use the product. But for any trial, I think beyond 100 assessments, we always charge money. And that was something which was very, very consistent that we had. And think about that. We were 3 large companies again in Gurgaon, large by Indian standards. And everybody was like short charging each other. I mean, so if Aspiring Minds pitches at 100, CoCubes goes and says 80, and then and something which is worth 200 rupees. So how do you manage that? So you then stick to 200 and see, okay, we'll win some and we'll lose some.
Okay. So were you the most expensive of the 3 in terms of the pricing?
Definitely.
Okay. Okay. That's nice. I think selling a premium, that's the Steve Jobs strategy, right? So you don't sell for less. You always sell for more. And
so so different assessments have different price points. So psychometric assessments were sold at a premium, definitely. Simulated assessments were sold at a premium. So where we were strong, we definitely charged premium. Where it was a commodity assessment for campus, it was at par.
Okay. So do we have any more questions coming up? I think we'll have 10 more minutes probably, and then so I think let's open it up. If people have questions, they can probably raise hands and go for it. If anybody is there, I think before that probably we can take a question. So I just specifically wanted to ask this. So for this discovery mode, I mean, are you looking to hire someone right now, or what is it? So if you can probably give a shout out to people here, if you have a specific thing, you can do that.
So So I've been working with a few interns. So the good thing about, as I said, Slowdown is that very good talent is available. So
Mm-hmm.
good set of IIM
Yeah.
Bangalore guys that we've been working with, and it's more about going deep into deep tech, going deep into finding opportunities in fintech and sales tech. What can be done? How can we improve sales? Or how can we improve uh, let's say things around the way an organization works today on the tech side, or let's say maybe fintech? There are a lot of opportunities. So just going deep into that, and I think the advice that I have got is let it cook, and one day you will know the answer. So it's cooking right now. Maybe biryani बनने में थोड़ा time लगता है, तो it's maybe at the right time we'll get enough conviction to start something full time. But right now it is more about exploring and trying a few things.
Mm-hmm. Great. I mean, you said you're trying things in food tech also, right? So I mean, you're trying new things as well. So yeah. So we have, I think, one last question from we'll take one question. So how is the future of online training, and without much human role interaction, how is it going to be? Like, does it go along without human intervention?
So if you take a course on Coursera today, I mean, it is already there. I mean, there's no human involved. If there's a human involved to create that course, but once it is on online, you can just take a course. You probably can interact with a few students, but there's no other interaction as such. You can never interact with that professor. So it's all so two things. One is that to start is easy, but to conclude that course is very, very difficult. So you have to be intrinsically motivated or keep pushing yourself to complete it. So there's now no teacher which will ask you कि यार time पे आओ, class में आओ, please पढ़ लो. And if you just visit any MBA college, they feel that हमने तो कृपा करिए यहाँ पे आके, and that probably that thing is not there. So you have to be very intrinsically motivated. And the second is, if you are intrinsically motivated, you can actually choose the best possible content out there that is available to enhance your skill. So it will no longer be let's say crappy content, or it will be just best in class content. And if you can cross that chasm, I think you would have crossed the biggest hurdle. I think the biggest hurdles, I believe, are in the minds. And if one can cross that, we're already there. I mean, essentially studying for something without a professor, without any other human on the other side, is already happening. And the only limiting factor is your mind, which either prevents you or lets you do it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, already, as you said, there are a lot of virtual online learning, e-learning, and everything. So, yeah, I think we're already there. I think we're pretty much there, and everything is virtual. So, I just, just like to give a special shout out to Srinivas Kolluri. We have like some people who are featured attendees. So, I just like to call out their names. So, hi Srinivas. We have Shanti. Hi Shanti. We have Anupama. Hi Anupama. We have Suhasini. Hi Suhasini. Yeah, I think that's it. We probably hello all. Thanks for being here, and thank you for those questions. I think I guess the questions were pretty relevant, Ketan.
Yeah.
So
they're very good.
Be like asking
they're
more.
Very good questions.
Yeah.
Ketan, one last question before we wrap.
Yeah.
This is Jignesh.
Hi, Jignesh.
Ketan, considering all that is going on right now, especially the lockdown and businesses moving very slow, making decisions very slow, what would be your quick tips to the teams in sales, or even the founders who are driving the sales now?
Great question.
Great question. So I was just speaking to the Mercer Metal CEO before this, and I think our sales are nearly zero on some of the business segments, but there's a new segment which is online education, which has just gone through the roof in the last 3 months, and we would have never expected such numbers from that segment, which was very, very small earlier. So the conclusion was that, okay, one door closed, but another door opened. And I would say that it may or may not be possible in every scenario and every business, but I would imagine, and again, hypothetically speaking, they would, given the business that you are in, given what you might be doing, there will be a new way of doing that same thing. And if you can either position your product in that new way, or morph your product a little bit to cater to that new way, you probably would have a far bigger chance to become a winner. So, and again, the example there is that because we do online assessments, and education was the most reluctant sector to move to online assessments, but suddenly because of compulsion, they just moved en masse. And we now have 4 IIMs working with Metal Mercer today and doing assessments on that platform, which probably would have taken 10 years. So that probably shrunk in 2 months. And because we have IIMs, we probably now we have IIMA as well. We might have other MBA institutes, and that is all big business. And this is recurring large scale business. So this was just a new door that opened by happenstance. And each scenario will be different. I understand that, but again, positioning in that new way of doing things might help. That is my high level thought.
Got it. And how about the pricing strategy? Does the freemium works, or for the time being, how do we stay in touch with them, engage with them, and turn it into business? So some tips and ideas around that.
So again, pricing is it's more like something which you can't get it right on day one, especially for a new thing. So the first step is to take feedback from your customers. And especially customers which are close to you, so that they can give frank, honest feedback. Nobody will say मैं ज़्यादा पैसा दूंगा कि नहीं दूंगा, but is that the right level or not? Do a lot of A/B testing, and maybe B2B sales, if you're not totally on SaaS, lets you do that A/B testing, different price points or different cuts of the same product or different types of pricing strategies. And once you keep doing it for some time, you will arrive at that sweet spot that this is the price wherein I am profitable or I am comfortable, and this is the price where the customer is also comfortable. And it should always be positioned as value minus, that I'm providing this much value, and that is why I want this much. The moment you start positioning as cost plus, it starts, you start digging a grave for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Thank you, Ketan.
Welcome. Do we have any questions? Yes. I think we almost read out all the questions in the audience. So thanks, Ketan. I think we are almost at the end of it. I just have one announcement to make. So we are looking for good volunteers for our community, and please feel free to reach out to us, either Yashwant, myself. We are always kind of recruiting new volunteers, and people who are interested to be just part of the community. You're most welcome, to talk to us. We cannot, grab a cup of coffee thanks to COVID, but we can actually probably do a virtual call sometime and, see what we can do for the community, and host, more awesome people like Ketan, and bring a lot of value to the community. So just a shout out to everyone out there. So if you want to reach out, we are always there. You can reach out to myself, Yash, or Revan.
Yeah, small
So
word
thanks,
from
guys.
my side.
I think
Small word
yeah.
from so Kashyap. So great questions. I was actually pleasantly surprised to see the quality of the questions.
Okay.
And given that you're doing this pro bono on the sides, taking out time for this, it's really commendable, and you're doing a stellar job. So kudos to you guys, and all the best. So again, as I said, that output wala jo point bola tha na maine ki, once you keep tinkering and doing stuff, you'll find a path. You'll find some opportunity. You will find, for example, I have come across 5 startups recently, or 3 startups recently, who want to create a platform to organize events remotely now. And one set of Harvard guys, another bunch of guys, very smart guys in India. So once you keep tinkering, new opportunities come your way, and this is how new ideas are born. They're not born thinking alone. Maybe that is also has its use, but if you are with like-minded people, and if you're deliberating and discussing these things, that is when the right ideas come to you. So great job, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Ketan. I think we might do more events with you probably in the future in different topics, and I think we'll be connected with you. If you have like anything else, like we'll be in touch. You're always kind of So thanks again. And guys, if you want to stay for some music, there's a networking, virtual networking that we're doing. So, stay back. Like if you want to, we can just chat, after the event. Thank you guys. Thanks, Ketan. Thanks for.
Thank you, Yash. Thank you, Kashyap. Thanks. Thank you, guys. Bye.
Thanks, Ketan. Good night. Bye.